There's a moment that arrives in every thinking person's life, a quiet epiphany that changes everything. You're standing in a crowded room, surrounded by laughter and conversation, yet you feel more alone than if you were sitting by yourself in an empty field. The chatter around you becomes white noise, meaningless syllables floating through air thick with pretense. And in that moment, you realize something profound. You don't belong here, and more importantly, you don't want to. This isn't loneliness speaking. This isn't social anxiety or fear. This is something far more sophisticated, the awakening of an intelligent mind that has discovered the profound difference between being alone and being lonely, between solitude and isolation, between the company of others and true companionship. Arthur Schopenhauer, the great German philosopher, once observed that a person can be himself only so long as he is alone. In those words lies a truth that pierces through centuries of social conditioning, revealing why the most intelligent among us often appear to care little for the elaborate dance of social life that consumes so many others. But why is this? What invisible thread connects intelligence to solitude? What secret knowledge do the thoughtful possess that makes them step back from the very thing most people desperately chase? Social acceptance, popularity, the warm embrace of belonging. The answer lies not in arrogance or superiority, but in a deeper understanding of what true fulfillment means. It rests in the recognition that the mind, when properly cultivated, becomes its own universe, vast, mysterious, and endlessly fascinating. Like a gardener who discovers that their small plot of land contains more beauty and complexity than any sprawling metropolis. The intelligent person finds that their inner world offers riches no social gathering could ever provide. Think of consciousness as a deep well. Most people spend their lives skimming stones across its surface, delighting in the ripples and splashes, never realizing the profound depths that lie beneath. But the intelligent mind, the curious, contemplative mind, drops anchor and descends. It discovers caves of wonder, streams of pure thought, ecosystems of ideas that have never seen the light of day. Why would such a person return to the surface to watch others skip stones? This isn't to say that intelligent people are incapable of social interaction, or that they view others with disdain. Rather, they've discovered something that fundamentally changes their relationship with social life: the difference between depth and breadth, between meaningful connection and mere contact. When you've experienced the profound intimacy of understanding, truly understanding an idea, a book, a piece of music, or even yourself, the shallow pleasures of small talk feel like trying to quench your thirst with cotton candy. It might be sweet, but it leaves you emptier than before. The intelligent person has tasted the deep waters of genuine insight, and everything else pales in comparison. Schopenhauer wrote extensively about what he called the hedgehog dilemma, the challenge faced by hedgehogs trying to stay warm in winter. Get too close to each other, and their spines cause pain. Stay too far apart, and they freeze. Humans, he argued, face the same challenge. We need each other, yet we inevitably hurt each other when we get too close. But the intelligent person has discovered a third option. They've learned to generate their own warmth. Through books, through reflection, through the cultivation of their inner life, they've become self-sustaining. They don't need to huddle with other hedgehogs because they've found a way to kindle their own fire. This self-sufficiency isn't born of coldness or misanthropy. It emerges from abundance, not scarcity. The intelligent person doesn't avoid social life because they have nothing to offer or because they fear rejection. They step back because they've found something better, a richness of inner experience that makes most social interactions feel like a step down, not up. Consider the difference between hunger and appetite. A starving person will eat anything placed before them, grateful for any sustenance. But someone who has just enjoyed a magnificent meal approaches food differently. They become selective, discerning. They're not hungry, so they can afford to be choosy. The intelligent person's relationship with social life follows a similar pattern. Having fed their soul on the banquet of ideas, art, philosophy, and self-reflection, They approach social situations not with desperate hunger, but with discerning appetite. This selectivity is often misunderstood by others as aloofness or arrogance. Why don't they want to hang out? People wonder, what makes them think they're too good for us? Appease. But the intelligent person isn't making a judgment about others' worth. They're making a choice about how to spend their most precious resource. Time. Time for the thinking person takes on a different quality. They understand its finite nature, not just intellectually, but viscerally. They feel the weight of each passing moment and recognize that every hour spent in meaningless conversation is an hour not spent reading, thinking, creating, or exploring the vast territories of their own consciousness. This awareness creates what might be called social opportunity cost. The recognition that saying yes to one thing means saying no to another. When you understand that a 2-hour dinner party could have been 2 hours with Marcus Aurelius, 2 hours composing music, 2 hours solving a mathematical problem, or simply 2 hours in quiet contemplation watching the light change across your room, the choice becomes clear. But there's something even more fundamental at work here, something that touches the very core of what it means to be human. The intelligent person has discovered that they are, in the truest sense, their own best company. This isn't narcissism, it's self-knowledge. They've explored the landscape of their own mind and found it to be a place of wonder, complexity, and endless discovery. Imagine you had access to the most fascinating person you've ever met. Someone whose thoughts surprise and delight you, whose insights illuminate the world in new ways, whose very presence makes you feel more alive and aware. Now imagine that person was available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, ready to engage in the deepest conversations, to explore any topic, to venture into any philosophical territory. Would you spend much time seeking out less engaging company? This is the secret that intelligent people have discovered. They have become genuinely interesting to themselves. Not in a shallow, self-absorbed way, but in the profound sense of being a worthy companion for their own journey through life. They've cultivated their minds like master gardeners, and now they get to enjoy the fruits of that cultivation. The tragedy is that most people never discover this possibility. They remain strangers to themselves, fleeing their own company as if from some great terror. They fill every moment with noise, distraction, and the presence of others because silence and solitude feel like death. But for the intelligent person, silence isn't empty, it's full. Solitude isn't isolation, it's connection with the deepest parts of themselves. This doesn't mean that intelligent people are hermits or that they've given up on human connection entirely. What they've done is raise their standards. Having experienced the profound satisfaction of genuine understanding, whether of an idea, a work of art, or themselves, they become less willing to settle for its shallow counterfeits. When they do engage socially, it's with intentionality and purpose. They seek quality over quantity, depth over breadth. They'd rather have one meaningful conversation a month than 30 meaningless ones. They'd rather sit in comfortable silence with someone who understands them than chatter endlessly with someone who doesn't. This selectivity extends beyond just social events to the very nature of relationships themselves. The intelligent person recognizes that not all human connections are created equal. Some people drain energy, others replenish it. Some conversations leave you feeling smaller, others leave you feeling expanded. Some relationships demand that you diminish yourself to fit in. Others invite you to become more fully who you are. Schopenhauer understood this when he wrote about the difference between what he called sociable and social people. Sociable people need others to feel complete. They define themselves through their relationships and interactions. Social people, on the other hand, can enjoy the company of others without needing it. They come to relationships from a place of wholeness, not emptiness. The intelligent person tends to be social rather than sociable. They've done the inner work necessary to become complete unto themselves. This completeness isn't a barrier to connection. It's actually what makes genuine connection possible. You can only truly meet another person to the extent that you've met yourself. But perhaps the most profound reason why intelligent people often appear to care little about social life is that they've discovered something that most people spend their entire lives searching for in all the wrong places. Meaning, they found it not in the approval of others, not in social status or popularity, but in the direct experience of understanding. There's a particular kind of joy that comes from grasping a difficult concept, from seeing connections that were previously invisible, from having an insight that illuminates some corner of existence. This joy is pure and self-sustaining. It doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition or approval. It exists independent of social context or external validation. Once you've tasted this kind of meaning, the meaning that comes from direct engagement with truth, beauty, and understanding, the meaning offered by most social situations feels thin and unsatisfying. It's like comparing the satisfaction of solving a complex mathematical proof to the satisfaction of winning at small talk. Both might be pleasant in their way, but they exist in entirely different leagues of human experience. The intelligent person has also typically developed what we might call metasocial awareness. They've become conscious of the games that drive most social interactions. They see through the masks, the pretenses, the unspoken hierarchies, and competitions. They recognize that much of what passes for social life is actually elaborate theater, with everyone playing roles they don't quite believe in. This awareness isn't cynical, it's simply clear-eyed. Once you see the mechanisms behind social interaction, participating in them becomes a choice rather than a compulsion. You might choose to play along sometimes, but you no longer confuse the game with reality. The intelligent person has learned to distinguish between their authentic self and their social self. They understand that the version of themselves they present in most social situations is a carefully edited highlight reel, designed to be palatable and non-threatening. But they've also discovered that this social self, while sometimes necessary, is ultimately unsatisfying to inhabit. In solitude, they can drop the performance. They can think thoughts that would be unwelcome in polite company. They can feel feelings that don't fit into social expectations. They can explore ideas that might disturb or confuse others. In short, they can be fully themselves without apology or explanation. This authenticity becomes addictive in the best possible way. Once you've experienced the freedom of being completely yourself, even if only in private, the constraints of social performance become more apparent and more difficult to bear. You begin to choose your social engagements more carefully, seeking out those rare situations where you can show up as yourself rather than as your social persona. The intelligent person has also typically developed a deep appreciation for what we might call productive solitude, time spent alone that actually creates something valuable. This might be art, writing, scientific research, philosophical inquiry, or simply the quiet work of self-understanding. They've learned that some of life's most important work can only be done alone. In a culture that often equates solitude with loneliness and social withdrawal with failure, this preference for productive aloneness can seem pathological. But the intelligent person knows better. They understand that great ideas need silence to develop, that creativity requires space to flourish, that wisdom grows in the garden of contemplation, not in the marketplace of opinion. They've discovered what every artist, scientist, philosopher, and mystic throughout history has known, that the most profound human experiences often happen in solitude. The mathematician working late into the night on an elegant proof, the writer finding exactly the right words to capture an elusive feeling, the musician hearing a melody that no one else has ever heard. These moments of pure human fulfillment typically happen alone. But perhaps most importantly, the intelligent person has learned to love themselves in the deepest sense. Not in the shallow way of self-obsession or narcissism, but in the profound way of genuine self-acceptance and appreciation. They've done the difficult work of getting to know themselves, their strengths and weaknesses, their patterns and contradictions, their dreams and fears. And they've found the result to be worthy of love. This self-love creates a kind of emotional abundance that changes everything. When you truly enjoy your own company, when you find yourself genuinely interesting and worthy of care and attention, you stop looking to others to fill a void that doesn't exist. You stop needing external validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You stop fearing loneliness because you've discovered that you're never truly alone when you're with yourself. The intelligent person understands that the relationship they have with themselves is the most important relationship of their life. It's the one relationship they can never escape, the one that will last from birth to death, the one that determines the quality of all other relationships. So they invest in it. They cultivate it. They treat themselves with the same care and attention they would give to a beloved friend. This doesn't mean they become self-absorbed or narcissistic. Paradoxically, the more complete they become as individuals, the more they have to offer others. But they offer from abundance rather than need, from strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion. As we reach the end of this exploration, it's important to recognize that intelligence isn't the enemy of connection. It's simply more selective about the forms connection takes. The intelligent person doesn't reject human relationship. They simply reject its shallow counterfeits. They don't avoid love. They avoid its desperate imitations. They don't flee from understanding. They flee from its absence. In a world that often seems to prize quantity over quality, noise over silence, movement over stillness, the intelligent person's preference for solitude becomes a radical act. It's a declaration that depth matters more than breadth. That meaning matters more than popularity. That truth matters more than acceptance. They've discovered something that our culture rarely teaches, that you can be deeply fulfilled without being constantly surrounded by others, that you can be fully alive without being perpetually entertained, that you can be genuinely happy without being universally liked. If this message has resonated with something deep within you, if you've recognized yourself in these words, you've felt the truth of what Schopenhauer knew centuries ago, that a person can be himself only so long as he is alone, then perhaps it's time to embrace your own capacity for solitude. Perhaps it's time to stop apologizing for preferring books to parties, silence to chatter, depth to superficiality. The path of intelligence is often a lonely one, but it's a loneliness rich with possibility, pregnant with discovery, alive with the endless fascination of existence itself. It's not a path that everyone will understand, but it's a path that leads to the most profound of destinations, a deep and abiding friendship with yourself. If this message touched you, comment, "I choose my peace."